There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states.
During a heated House session, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tried to justify restricting people's access to firearms with one of her trademark tightly layered explanations. She worked hard to frame her point as urgent and entirely reasonable, speaking with full confidence even as many in the room pushed back. But before her argument had the chance to build momentum, Congressman Clay Higgins cut through it with a single pointed remark. His quick response instantly shattered the tone she was setting, throwing her off balance and challenging everything she had been working toward. In moments, the exchange shifted from what looked like another lengthy debate to one of the most startling moments of the hearing. The abrupt ending left the room unsettled, with many unsure how her argument unraveled so quickly right in front of them.
Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? The country where homes were built in cities with no locks.
So, today, we're breaking everything apart step by step. One of the main goals is to stay fair and avoid pushing anyone into an uncomfortable position. Our focus is to look at this from a simple, everyday perspective that feels honest and relatable. With the internet and the news constantly buzzing, most discussions turn into arguments before anyone truly listens. This space is different, and it's meant for calm thinking, respectful conversation, and a clearer look at what's actually going on. We're going straight into the details, avoiding confusion and unnecessary drama. If you'd rather understand the situation yourself instead of following whatever happens to be the loudest opinion online, you're exactly where you need to be.
Let's talk facts here. There was a lot of discussion about New York City. There is no discussion about gun violence in New York City without discussing the iron pipeline that is Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and honorary mention to Ohio, where 70% of likely illegal trafficked guns found in
If you're enjoying this breakdown, make sure to tap the subscribe button. At this point, AOC's message is crystal clear. She argues that the so-called iron pipeline is the driving force behind firearms appearing in major cities, suggesting that guns purchased legally in states with looser rules, be like Florida or Georgia, are then transported into places such as New York. She places the blame squarely on red states, saying the violence stems from interstate movement and differing regulations. But by directing all the attention toward the suppliers and ignoring the decisions of the individuals committing the offenses, her view misses a major part of the picture. She repeats the same storyline when shifting toward Chicago and its proximity to Indiana, insisting that large numbers of dangerous weapons are crossing the state line. In her view, the way guns move from one state to another may explain the entire issue, while the choices and intentions of the people using those weapons take a back seat.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states. I move on. Every week in recent memory, we have had at least one mass shooting. This is not normal. Not only is it not normal, it is internationally embarrassing and delegitimizing to the United States.
This argument comes from someone whose own party helped put Biden in the Oval Office and chose Kamala Harris as vice president. Yet now she's raising concerns about how other nations see us. Not too long ago, the former president often seemed lost during major international events, leaving many around the world uneasy. Meanwhile, Chicago has some of the toughest firearm rules in the country, yet it still faces constant violence that regularly makes national headlines. In fact, close to half of the guns used in crimes there are brought in from outside the city. That detail alone directly challenges AOC's claims. It shows that people determined to break the law will continue to do so, no matter how many policies or limits are introduced. Just look at Canada or several countries across Europe. Even with strict regulations, issues still arise, and criminals often turn to different tools instead. Still, AOC pushed forward, insisting she had finally identified the real problem, leading her to make the following point.
Now let's talk about why. Let's talk about one thing more important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit. In 2020, again, more than 45,000 Americans by gunfire, reflecting an almost threefold increase from 2015. Are those statistics correct?
That's accurate.
So in your view, are you seeing a correlation between gun profits and gun deaths in the United States?
Here, AOC argues that there's a strong connection between the nation's rising death toll and the profits earned by the arms industry. At this stage, her focus suddenly shifts, as if both numbers climb together. Instead of speaking about the guns themselves, she begins highlighting the financial motivations that she believes fuel the political fight. She points out how large companies pour huge amounts of money into stopping safety laws, suggesting that aggressive lobbying blocks any attempt to introduce new standards. After making this broad claim, she tries to steer the discussion toward what she calls the root causes. But in reality, it functions more like a convenient distraction.
For context, the NRA spent about $250 million in 2020 alone. That's more than twice the entire salary of Congress combined. In 1 year, lobbying against gun safety laws. There's also this discussion about anything but a gun, but that these are about violent people. But yet we aren't doing anything about addressing the actual root causes of misogyny, where 2/3 of mass are connected to domestic violence, or the emergence of white supremacy radicalization, mass incarceration, and poverty, and the connections between that and mass in our communities. I yield my time. Thank you, Madam.
A way to shift attention away from the weaknesses in her own party's long-standing policies. It's a strategy designed to pull the spotlight in another direction, avoiding the issues that have been growing clearer year after year. To begin with, bringing identity politics into a debate about firearms is the last thing anyone needs. It doesn't help. It only makes the issue harder to understand and pulls attention away from the real facts. A serious conversation turns into a tangled argument, and the truth gets buried under unnecessary complications. AOC should remember that two things happening at the same time doesn't prove one causes the other, no matter how strongly she tries to link unrelated ideas.
Bring us back in time to World War II. America's population, 140 million. 15 million American men came home from World War II. There was weapons everywhere. We'll talk about mental challenge. My father was one of those men who was a Navy pilot in World War II. He came back from the war and built his family on the 7th of his 8 children. We had guns everywhere. There was virtually no regulation. Any child in the 50s could buy a weapon from any seller if daddy sent them with the money. We didn't have mass shootings. It wasn't until 1968 in America that serial numbers were even required on weapons sold in this country. You order weapons through the Sears catalog by the mail.
And throwing out large numbers without proper context doesn't actually explain anything. In 2023, nearly 47,000 people lost their lives due to firearm-related injuries, but during that same year, around 43,000 died in motor vehicle accidents, and roughly another 47,000 passed away due to accidental falls. So does that mean we should ban cars or stop people from using stairs? Obviously.
You know what these houses did not have? That were built 100 years ago in cities in America. You know what they did not have, Commissioner? Locks. Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks. A country where guns were everywhere, virtually not regulated at all. Where millions of Americans, 14 million Americans came back. It's 11% of the population at the time after World War II. And here we sit today, where an entire once proud Democratic Party is presenting unbelievably unconstitutional laws to press upon our nation, and we have a police commissioner that says he would go home to home and confiscate legally owned weapons.
The point is simple. Numbers alone can't solve anything. Real progress starts with straightforward, honest discussion, not with statistics dropped into a conversation without proper explanation. Fortunately, Clay Higgins stepped in later and helped clear up some of the confusion. When everything is brought down to its core, the truth becomes unmistakable. Firearms are objects with no will of their own. They only become harmful when a person chooses to misuse them. That doesn't mean thoughtful rules should be dismissed. Honest discussions about reducing harm and improving safety without crossing important lines and are genuinely valuable, but any discussion must stay within the boundaries set by the Second Amendment. Ignoring those protections would open the door to government control that risks the personal freedoms every individual deserves. Finding the right balance between safety and personal independence isn't always simple, but it's essential.